Appreciate it. Let's give Megan and John a round of applause. Louder than that. Oh, there you are. Okay. All right. So let's jump right into it this afternoon here with our first panel. This is going to be the Esports Executive Panel. Coming to the stage in a second here are leaders from a variety of verticals in the esports space. They are here to share their individual perspectives on our industry's opportunities, the challenges they see, and of course to make some predictions regarding the trends that we expect in 2023. And we do have a distinguished panel. Listen to this. Our moderator is Sandra L. Richards. She is the Managing Director, Head of Global Sports and Entertainment and Segment Sales and Engagement for Morgan Stanley. You come on up, Sandra. Thank you. Brett Diamond, the COO of Version 1 and Minnesota RØKKR. Thank you. Rakia Reynolds, founder of Skai Blue Media. And Kurt Melcher, Varsity Esports Pioneer, Executive Director for Esports and Gaming at Intersport. Ms. Richards, it's all yours.
Good afternoon. I know there's more people in here. Good afternoon. So I have a lot of gadgets, which I think you all can appreciate, right? I gotta get some of these things out of my pocket. I think I have another thing. Oh, that's the lav mic, my bad. Good afternoon. As just said, I'm Sandra Richards with Morgan Stanley. We're so excited to be here, and I know we have a short time, and you got some amazing panelists up here, so I'm just going to lead the conversation, but you're going to get content from them. I'm told that you're not supposed to be able to ask questions, but if you got a question, you let me know. And we're going to get it in the conversation, okay? All right. Well, I'm going to, one of our panelists could not be here, unfortunately, so we got Brett to join us.
Good job, Brett.
Yay, Brett, thank you for doing that.
Of course, this is my attending a conference attire, not participating in the panel attire, so you'll excuse me.
But
We could switch shoes if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
but you got the purple going on for your team, though, right?
You got it.
Yeah, see, I know, on brand. Okay, well, you know what, who we gonna start with? We're gonna start with Brett, since I was just talking to you. Let's start with you.
All right.
Make an introduction. Let's say you're doing your elevator pitch. What you gonna say to the people?
Yeah, so Brett Diamond from Version 1 in Minnesota RØKKR. We're an esports and gaming entertainment organization based out of Minnesota. We're owned by the Wilf family, owners of the Minnesota Vikings and Gary Vaynerchuk. We have teams in Call of Duty League, that's Minnesota RØKKR, and under the Version 1 brand, we have a Valorant team, a Rocket League team, and a women's Valorant team that plays as Version X. And we also have 6 content creators across all 3 of the titles that we're in. So excited to be here and looking forward to the panel.
Okay, I took your pitch. Rakia?
My name's Rakia Reynolds. I'm the founder and executive officer of Skai Blue Media. We are a multimedia, multicultural communications agency. We work on the storytelling for people, products, and places. So on the people side, we worked in the sports space, and on the product side, we work with a lot of Web3 and gaming clients.
My name is Kurt Melcher. I'm the Executive Director of Gaming and Esports at Intersport here in Chicago. Intersport's a sports marketing media production agency. I work exclusively for gaming and esports, working with brands, activating into the space, helping them understand the gaming space and esports space. We run white label production for a number of different publishers. Warner Brothers being one of the largest, whether that's Injustice, Mortal Kombat, a new title, Multiverses. I came to esports really just as an endemic fan first. I used to write there used to be these things called magazines that people would subscribe to. They would send them to your mailbox. I used to write like editorials and game reviews way back in college. And I worked in collegiate sports for the NEI. I see Michael Brooks here. At a school called Robert Morris University here in Chicago, is now merged with Roosevelt University, where I started the world's first varsity esports program, where we awarded scholarship, hired staff, built a facility on campus. That was back in 2014. And now there's over 530 formal programs. And I'm really passionate about scholastic, collegiate and scholastic esports. And I think that is an interesting sort of vertical that doesn't get enough attention in this space. But that's how I kind of came into position here at Intersport.
Okay, well, Kurt answered my first question, so I'm going to go to Brett, so you can tell us what inspired you to get into this space.
Yeah, so I was working for the Minnesota Vikings at the time, and I'd always been, well, I shouldn't say always, but I had been fascinated by the emergence of esports as a business. This is, probably 2016-ish. And around that time, the NFL was rolling out their first true engagement with the NFL teams around Madden competitive gaming. So I had the opportunity to take the lead on that project for the Vikings, and it was a relatively small part of my overall role. But through that sort of became my joke, and it's not really a joke, is that, the old saying in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, right? That was like how it worked at the Vikings, where when the leadership team started looking at opportunities in the esports space, I became an unofficial advisor to the ownership group. And when they got serious about acquiring the Call of Duty League franchise slot that ultimately became Minnesota RØKKR, I had an opportunity to switch roles and take on leadership of this organization going forward. So it was really, a number of steps that led to that, and it's been a full sprint for the 3 years since then.
Wow. And clearly you love purple.
Yes.
You have to say
Oh
that.
yeah, gotta stay on brand.
Yeah, of course. So Rakia, yours is a little different because you're in the space of what you said earlier about storytelling. Tell us about what you're doing in this space from the seat you sit in and with your company with Sky Blue Media.
Sure. So early on, I was in the traditional sports space, working with Serena Williams and her brands and my job specifically, or my agency was tasked with, we have all of these brand partners. How do we effectively tell stories through her lens? And how do we effectively tell stories through her mission and her vision and have them all connected? So I started doing that in 2013. And so working with, an athlete like Serena Williams for such a long time, you're exposed to so many things. And I remember a little before the pandemic, we had talked about, what it would be like for, her to have a video game and do all of these things. And so our team did a deep dive in the world of esports and gaming. And through some of that research, I was exposed to other Web3 companies and then was brought on to advise some Web3 companies in the play to earn and learn to earn space, which is essentially one of the founders that I work with. She was really inspired by Axie Infinity and the sort of the vast way that you could be in the space of gaming, but coming from places that are a little more under-resourced, like Manila in the Philippines, to say, hey, someone in their 60s, and I was telling people at breakfast earlier, traditionally when you think about esports and gaming, you think about younger people, and Sandra, you had talked about, what about people that are not 24 and 25. And so I was really inspired by companies that were being a little more inclusive and having an inclusive lens. So being able to work sort of in that Web 2 traditional space with, people like Serena Williams and Allison Felix, and now going right into the world of Web 3, looking at different models in esports and different models of gaming that will offer more access to people in under-resourced areas, specifically in the play to earn and learn to earn space.
So I know you just said a lot, but I'm actually intrigued by something with a video game that you're trying to create with Serena. Are you going to get the in the game? That is so funny that you said that. Years ago, we had to recreate her hitting the racket, and it was so hard to record the sound in a great way. So we had to play with it. And what we did at the end of any content that we produced with her online, so that you knew it was produced internally. For example, for some of the brands, they have video teams that work on things, but when she wanted it to be her team producing something, that's the way we were able to distinguish. We had the at the end. So look at that. And we had a little S. Well, our graphic designer did the little S, and then we had the ends of the S for tennis balls, one here, like a little ping and a little ping, and then we did the at the end. Look at you. I have to send you the audio version of it. You're welcome. I just gave you an inside tip. But I want to talk about the metaverse, and I want to talk about gaming shifting in the metaverse, and I want to start with you, Kurt. What's your thoughts and opinions there?
Yeah, I think it's interesting for sure, and I think there is and will happen, right? A sort of this, and it's cliche to say, but that Ready Player One mentality, right? Of where you're playing games inside the metaverse, and it's fully immersive. I think it's going to take some time to kind of get there. And I feel like the frenzy that existed around esports and platforms and teams and sports leagues and sport organizations, 4 or 5 years ago, sort of all of that frenzy has shifted to metaverse. And for sure, just the technology that exists, right, in blockchain use cases will apply to games. There's just no doubt about it. I don't think it's going to happen in the iteration of games that sort of like the large titles that sort of define esports now, whether that's like League of Legends or Call of Duty, just because there is sort of that friction between gamers and what that means and how it's could be applied, because gamers have been in a metaverse or have used cryptocurrency, whether that's in-game monetization and buying X coin, whether it's Gleamium or RP or whatever. So they're absolutely familiar with what that means and the uses within, and they're also been burned through like pay to win, right? Which goes against sort of the antithesis of like gaming, right? And sort of like what's noble and right. So there definitely will be an evolution that, in my opinion, happens. It'll probably be from one of those new technology platforms or one of the new game platforms that are coming out where it's an amazing, fun game to play, and I want to or have to play because it's just that great. I don't see a use case for like League of Legends saying like, hey, we're shifting to tokenization and it's going to be NFTs, and then there's this sort of morphing that occurs. So I think it makes a ton of sense where I could actually own an in-game item. I think there's also a narrative around, oh, well, in-game items can be shared from platform to platform to platform. That interoperability is not really a thing right now, technology-wise, right? But that's not to say like in 5 years, what can that be or what can that look like? So I think there is a really, really strong use case for it in the future.
Brett, Rakia, your thoughts?
I can see it both ways. So I think because esports already has the community, the convening, the fandom, the merch, all of those things that, Web3 folks are trying to create. You go to a Web3 event, you go to NFT NYC, you get a POAP, which is a proof of attendance protocol. So the same thing happens in esports. You just showed me on your phone 300 people convening. And what the Web3 and crypto companies have not been able to successfully do is organically build those communities. So I believe that in the world of the metaverse, crypto companies, because this bear market that we're in, this crypto winter that we're living in, because of this impending recession, I think, and I know you have some questions about like what we see in the future, so I might be getting a little ahead of myself. I think crypto companies are gonna flock more to esports companies, because in the world of the metaverse, and especially the way that blockchain technology works right now. So if you think about how big this industry is, and I think it's projected by 2025, it's supposed to be like a $3 billion industry right now. Y'all are at like 1.5 billion or something. But the potential to have engineers and people that can successfully code on the blockchain that have Web 2 game developer experience is crucial. So every crypto conference that you go to right now, they're looking for developers that are in the gaming space because they know how to program. Right now, less than 10% of all developers know how to code for, I think it's 1% of developers know how to code for the blockchain. 10% of those people right now are just working in the Web 2 gaming space. So you all, like gaming people in esports, you have what the blockchain companies and the crypto companies don't have. You have community, you have the experience, you have the engineer. So I think that you all can help to fuel what's happening in the metaverse.
Yeah, that's actually a perfect tee up to the way that we think about it. We want, as an esports organization and gaming organization, we want to build a brand and build the capabilities that can pivot to whatever that future is, right? And I don't think it's necessarily in the next, couple years, though we're keeping an eye on it. But what that looks like a few years from now. Like I make the comparison a lot that esports is like the NFL in the 1920s or, the MLS in the 90s, right? And so kind of extending that to the metaverse, right? It's sort of like having a conversation about TV in the 1940s or, you know, or social media in the early 2000s. Like what that future looks like, I'd be lying if I sat up here and said that I know what that looks like, but we have a sense of what, as an organization, as a brand, we want to put the pieces in place today to be able to jump into that when the time comes.
So I want some advice from all three of you. This is personal. I don't know if you all are going to care about this. But I'm looking to build my avatar. Now, I can wear this little yellow dress. I don't know what yellow tells me. But what you think I should do? Tell me. What you think my avatar should be? First of all, Rakia, I know you're all into color.
Yes.
So should I use the color blue?
I think you should use all colors. So for those, what you're talking about, like for me, I have an NFT as my profile photo, my PFP, and my avatar. It's all different colors. I think you rock yellow really well. You could have like a yellow avatar.
Yeah, but I'm always not in the mood for yellow though. So anybody want to tell me anything else? What else I should do? Purple, what does purple say? Because maybe I want to join the bucket.
Purple in the world of marketing, if we're talking about marketing, marketers look at purple for high. So like high meaning elevation, like you're speaking over someone else, because traditionally, not to get nerdy, but purple is the sign of royalty. So when you look at what marketers use to help with the brain, to stimulate the brain towards purple, they say this is regal and this is sort of on a higher level.
You can just change week to week, wherever your mood is.
Yeah, okay. Well, now that I've done diverted personally, I'm going to get back to this conversation. And so, Kurt, when we had the conversation to prep for this panel, one of the things we talked about very passionately, I think all of us, and certainly, Brett, I want your opinion here too, is the thought about equity and diversity in this space, and the thought about where we are today and where we can go to get more diversity and inclusion in this space. So, Kurt, you want to start first?
Yeah, and I think that is, you know, if we talk about esports specifically, it is an industry-wide problem across platforms and titles, certainly, particularly as we get to see, you know, we look at professional esports, whereas we know there really shouldn't be any kind of cutoff or any sort of physical limitation, right, related to in-game skill. And yet we really see less than 1% of across all titles of females that are in the professional ranks. So that leads to like a lot smarter people than I have put some academic rigor against it, and really it kind of boils down to just online toxicity and online environments, in-game environments, and people are really, really nasty, as we know, especially in gaming communities when it's easy to blame other people, and particularly if you know either through an avatar or a voice comm or through just an in-game name, it just, you know, people especially can be really nasty. So that disincentivizes a whole half of the population of female gamers who may be just as passionate as others who want to participate and get better. It's like, why would I go online and play on this game where it's a terrible experience for myself, right? And I think publishers have come a long way of like female representation, and not just gender, but also across races and sexuality, inclination of including that, right? And being cognizant of, rather than, you know, if you go back to the early, say, like Street Fighter days of what females look like in those games, right? It's highly sexualized. And probably doesn't feel good for a female to play those games, right? Because it doesn't always look like themselves. So I think that is something that publishers are coming around to, but I think publishers can do more to incentivize and to support sort of that sort of on the competitive side of things, and a lot more. And we see some of that with Game Changers and with Riot Games. And I think GameHers are doing a lot of important work in this space. But I think really it is an industry-wide problem. And I think Scholastic can play an important role in sort of evening that out, where there's always an adult in the room and there's somebody that's correcting behavior and are sort of setting lanes into what online environments should or could be. So I think we have a long way to go, but it's a problem that I think everyone has said from 5 years, 10 years ago. People are like, oh boy, you know, there's no difference between how many people play games, male to female. It's almost 50-50. It's just we're finding this drop off a cliff on the female side of things, and we have to solve for that socially rather than just like technology solve.
Right, Rakia?
Yeah, I mean, I'll add some thoughts from kind of some things that we've, how we've approached some things at an organizational level. So Kirk mentioned Game Changers, which is Riot Games, Women's Valorant League, and I think they're expanding to League of Legends as well. So we have a Game Changers team, and actually we tend to not refer to it as a Game Changers team because they can also enter the other levels of Valorant, and they play in a lot of tournaments that are not just women tournaments. Before we started that team, there was a lot of discussion within our organization of, is that the right way to support women gamers, right? Because it does speak to, the goal we all want to work towards as teams and as an industry is that women should be playing alongside men at the top level, right? Now, the discussions we had internally, our leadership team is 60% women, and that's director level and above in our organization, and our staff is about 50-50. So when we had those discussions, we had women that had played video games their whole lives, that had competed at various levels or been content creators. And so we weren't just going and tapping the two women that work for our organization on the shoulder and asking them to be a part of that conversation. Those were the senior leaders in our organization that would have naturally been a part of that discussion. And ultimately, to Kirk's point on the toxicity that exists, what the Game Changers program, and we have our own Visionaries is a program that we have that's for various levels of casual and competitive gamers, women and women identifying gamers, to have that safe place to compete and hone their skills as they grow to the point where they can ultimately compete at the higher levels. And Kirk mentioned the game her, so Rebecca Dixon, who's in the front row here, and Rebecca Longawa next to her. Both of them are doing great work in this space. So if you're interested, would highly recommend talking to Rebecca Dixon or the two Rebeccas. But what Riot Games has done well is give organizations like ours a reason to build a team, and the viewership that those tournaments get is very real. I mean, it's some of those matches have been on par or close to what our Call of Duty League team viewership is. So it's growing, and it's an important part of the industry and what we should all be a part of.
I think there's systemic racism and white supremacy and all of those things that we can always say. I think representation matters at all levels. So when I look at industries, especially in esports, gaming, and Web3, I start at, okay, who are the people that are pulling all of the strings? And if 10% of those folks are women, and then after that, there might be 1% of that 10% who represent Black, Indigenous people, people of color, Latinx people, then you can't be what you can't see. So when you think about kids that are playing games, and like my son, he plays Fortnite, and I look at all of the different things, and it might be, it might be a little more developed now, but in looking at the characters, it's either this or that. And so I think from an art standpoint, because I'm in the world of storytelling, so every, colors and all imagery, it matters so much. I think for Gen Zers, it matters even more. So I want an avatar who might have hair that looks like mine. It might have an afro. It's more than just having something that you think somebody might. Okay, we have different complected, and I'm speaking from a black perspective right now, but like looking at some of these video games and you see not all of the right shades. If I'm playing this character and I'm in the world of the metaverse, I actually want to live this person. I want to be this person, and I can't live and be this person if there's no true representation. It's the same for folks that are consider themselves non-binary. It's like, I can't fit into this mold and I can't fit into that mold. So I think we have way more than diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially in these spaces of esports. We need to start going into the world of belonging and mattering. How are you making people feel like they belong? How are you making people feel like they matter? Are you designing things that are for the future? Because to your point, it's very antiquated. It does feel like we are you know, we're a little set back in some of these things. But if we think about the opportunity of esports and gaming in the world of Web3, Web3 is the new iteration of the internet. So in another 10 years, we won't be saying Web3, we'll just be saying Web3 because it's just like how we started talking about the internet. So I think if folks take a step back to sort of go forward to say, what are people gonna want in the next 10 years? It's hiring the right engineers, it's hiring the right designers, it's hiring the right people at the table so that you can do what esports has done so well, which is foster this great community of people that like to get together for the fandom, for the merch, and just the community of it all.
So I know we pointed out Gamer is here. Do we have Ryan Johnson here from Community X? I know he's supposed to be here, but I think tomorrow. But I think when we continue to talk about the diversity and inclusion, belonging and mattering, I think it's also important to look at organizations like this in terms of how could we elevate and support the mission of what they're on and doing, because part of what they're doing the groundwork. They're really directing to the people beyond like just the business space. And I know that Community X is really doing some stuff going into the schools and doing it with younger kids, focused on the Black and brown communities. And so I think when we're talking about charitable initiatives and scholarships we want to start and the like, because there's so many schools popping up with these esports programming. In fact, I think in Florida, I saw on CBS Morning News, it's like a $85 million stadium going up just dedicated to gaming and esports. So clearly there's the dollars to be there, but we don't want to, we have an opportunity to be inclusive and not wait until there's a problem and be part of like a solution before it happens. So I think that just looking at some of these conversations around diversity and inclusion in esports and having the conversations with the gamers, the community access, and those who I don't know that you exist out there, let us know that you exist, because I think that that is part of what we need to do. And I'm gonna give for my soapbox, but that's what we clearly need to focus on in this space. Speaking of the trends in this space, beyond going on the diversity and inclusion, what are you all seeing as like the trends, and part of it, what are you optimistic about, and what are you concerned about that hoping that you get optimistic about? Let's start with you, Kurt.
Yeah, I'm optimistic about competitive gaming, right? Because I think there's, you know, over the last couple of years, especially particularly, you know, as a recession kind of rolls in, there's been a narrative of, oh my gosh, well, esports it's over, right? Like it wasn't, Overwatch League is struggling a little bit, right? Maybe it didn't manifest to sort of how it was projected, but competitive gaming will always be around. It's just, it's in the DNA of players that if they just want to get together to play for fun, they're going to try to win, right? Like they want to win. So it's never going away. I think publishers are starting to become a little smarter on how they approach esports, and are understanding like, hey, maybe it makes sense to become a bigger partner of version 1 and support what they're doing to sort of create a larger ecosystem where there can be more involved, right? Instead of just being so rigid. So I'm encouraged by that. I think the future is a lot of it, I think, will be defined by like user-generated content, right? If you think about like Minecraft or Roblox, what is that version kind of, how does that work for, say, a game like Riot, right? Do they open those kind of gates to sort of allow just this enormous community to create? And how does that manifest, right, related to their title, and then selling in-game items and all of those things? And I think that is like a unique potential bridge to sort of like Web3 and what that means and sort of ownership of what happens within that space. I think we're a little ways away right there, because I think that really is like letting loose the reins for like a Riot to sort of get there. But that's just always been the iteration of like games into esports, right? If you think about Half-Life into Counter-Strike, or Warcraft 3 to like Dota, and then Dota like to League of Legends. So it's in the DNA of competitive gaming that the best titles kind of come from just those users that create something, and then it gets refined and refined and refined. So I think that is a unique kind of like next iteration of what it means. of competitive gaming and how it comes to life is sort of like publishers, teams, players, creators all coming together to kind of forge and navigate that next iteration of esports.
Rakia, optimistic or?
I am optimistic about a few things. I think for the world of esports specifically, businesses, a lot of companies now are trying to figure out different ways to rebuild community because they've lost community from, hybrid work models and working remotely. And I would be optimistic to see more companies use things like esports to galvanize if you have global teams. I don't know if that's happening, but incentivizing people, having people compete, having people build that sort of camaraderie and community in the world of games, through the world of esports. I think that's something that'll happen in the next 2 to 3 years. I also do think, back to what I said earlier about the world of Web3 and sort of the architects of the metaverse, I think those folks are looking at how how the world of esports has evolved and got real bodies and communities together, not via, an Oculus or not via a headset, but getting people together to compete. Because we're seeing a lot of that in the world of Web3 via hackathons and things like that. And what I'm seeing in the Telegram groups are, how do we rebuild community when trust has been sort of taken away with this market fail and the bear market? So I think one of the things that I'm optimistic about for the world of Web3 specifically is taking that sort of gaming experience and making it applicable to how companies will be built in the future.
Yeah, absolutely optimistic. And I think when there's going to be several different iterations of what the business model around esports and competitive gaming looks like before it reaches its final form, and it's nowhere near that point yet, right? And you see that happening with a lot of things. Kirk used the term next big thing. Anything that is the next big thing will go through multiple iterations on its way to being the big thing, right? And you see it whether it's esports, NFTs, even the big streaming services, Netflix, Disney Plus, Paramount, et cetera. Like, all of these industries are going through sort of their own ebbs and flows as they progress towards what it will eventually be, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, no different than the internet did and social media did in the early days, right? So that's a bit abstract. Like, what we bring it back to at its core is, building that community, that passion with a fan base. And anybody who wants to see, I'll spend all day showing these videos on my phone. We were in the Rocket League World Championship not this weekend, the prior weekend, and it was 13,000 fans, sold out arena. They sold out in like 3 hours. And if you don't look at what they're watching, if you just look at video of the crowd, video of video of our players' parents celebrating, of our fans, getting excited for the match, like any of those pictures, if you don't know what they're watching, you would think that could be an NFL fan base, that could be a baseball or basketball fan base. Like, that passion is real. How we get to the point where it is sustainably monetized and there's a sustainable business around it, that'll take a little bit of time.
So what's your advice? No. Before we were talking about gaming and you talked about community, and I'm wondering if Morgan Stanley would do this. And I might be the one to bring this there. Community and gaming. What's your go-to game? Past or present?
Ooh, past is Contra. Who remembers Contra? I still have the code to get a lot of people in Contra. Contra was my favorite game ever. And then I have one of those old school games in my house that has like 1,500 games on it, like all the old school games, Pac-Man, Street Fighter, all of it. But I am a Contra fan through and through. You got me excited with that question.
Kurt.
I would say past is like StarCraft Brood War, and present is Multiverses, which is like a WB Smash Brothers platformer.
Okay, Brett.
I did love Contra, and there should be some sort of contest at these conferences where if you know the code, like you get something. Yep, left, right, BA, select, start. That was not rehearsed in any way. We met like 5 minutes before this panel. I'd say currently I play a lot of Call of Duty. That was our first title. I try to play enough of any title that we get in to make sure that I understand like how a fan or a player would experience the game, but I definitely play more Call of Duty than I need to, as my wife reminds me from time to time. Going back when I was younger, probably the Zelda games were kind of my go-to growing up.
Okay.
Sims and Roblox now.
Sims and Roblox? Yeah, I'm good old Miss Pac-Man. All this about code up, down. You can have that. I don't want it. So tell us about, somebody getting into the sport or getting into the seat that you're currently sitting in. What advice would you give them at this level in what you're doing and what you're seeing, and things that people would not think it requires to be in the seat that you're sitting in?
I would say just a desire to learn, right? Like this is such a new and evolving space and nobody has all the answers for it. And if you start there and just try to learn, whether it's at a conference like this, listening to the panels, having the conversations and the networking sessions, like I personally, when I got into this role 3 years ago, consumed an enormous amount of just podcast after podcast of the esports industry. And just like starting to take it in and then figure out how you can take that information and make it relevant to whatever your role is, whether you're an intern or a senior level executive, paying attention to what the fans are doing. It's basically consumer behavior 101, right? Like just consuming that content as a fan would and figuring out how to operationalize that is, to me, a key piece regardless of where you sit on an org chart.
I would say consume. If you're someone that wants to really dive into the space, consume, and consume on different mediums. I've noticed how people who listen to podcasts will receive that information or watch YouTube videos and the explainer videos of gamers, and they're consuming the information differently. I've now seen the trend of like Gen Zers, younger, because I'm a mom, so I'm paying attention to Fortnite and Roblox and all of the things that they're doing, from sharing their information across channels. So like, how is Twitch talking to TikTok? How is TikTok then talking to YouTube? So I think you have to be able to consume information, but consume it in a way that's gonna be comfortable for you, whether it is a podcast, whether it's reading, whether it's going to a conference. If you're someone that likes really short, snackable information, listen to an AMA on Twitter. All of those folks are talking about competitive sports in a way that is short, snackable, and easily digestible, which I've seen, and then just that sharing of information from YouTube and Twitter.
Yeah, I would say become like a student of the industry, because like it's almost cyclical in some ways, right? If I think about like CGS from 2007, it was Championship Gaming Series, was an esports season with sort of defined cities and players of playing CS:GO and Arkham Racer that was on DirecTV. It was a massive investment into the space, and had some successes, but then eventually kind of sort of declined a little bit, went away, and then it sort of reboots. Another publisher kind of comes up, or another platform comes up and sort of wants to reboot esports in a unique way, but it's sort of taking some parts of that and not the lessons learned from that and then applying it to their new title. So I think it's really just becoming a student of the game and also being able to distill down to, esports and gaming it's a really complex sort of ecosystem with a lot of different stakeholders, from publishers and their publishing teams to their esports teams, and the different platforms and teams and influencers and brands that are trying to figure out the space and activate across. So being able to distill down to brands and different groups of what the industry is and how it operates sort of across all of those stakeholders, and what are the value chains across it all, I think are really important to be able to just sort of like lay it out, so to kind of gain that understanding. I can tell you I do a lot of brand work, a lot of brand 101 still, and it generally is not like endemic brands, and there still is like a big learning curve of, this is gaming, this is how many people are involved in gaming, this is esports, well, what's the difference between esports and gaming? They're, every esport is a video game. Not every video game is an esport. And what does that space look like across? And what are ways to potentially get in, the right ways to do so that will add value to their brand and to the gamers or esports? So there still is a little ways to go, but I think it's a problem that ages in rather than ages out, because the honest truth is, like, if a CMO of like a Fortune 500 company likes NASCAR, guess what? They're going to find the value of using their brand in NASCAR. It's just kind of how it goes. And just the numbers, gaming can't escape that. There will be CMOs that love to play Zelda and Contra and League of Legends and StarCraft that are coming soon. And that will be the natural sort of turn, because that's where the audience is, that's where the eyeballs are, that's where the engagement is. And we'll see sort of that, as you said, like, esports hasn't sort of hit its next yet. That's kind of where I think everything starts to click.
So we have a number of Morgan Stanley people in here. If you're sitting, can you stand? If you're standing, can you wave? Morgan Stanley people? You can wave and say hi. So I work with, my team and I work with a group of people day in and day out, financial advisors who are working with clients in this space as players and as executives in this space. But again, from the seat that you're sitting in and lens that you're looking at, if you had to talk to them and say, here's the things that you need to keep on top of mind, as Rakia, you also just mentioned where the numbers are going to go for this place, and in that not only the business is growing, but the wealth creation is happening. And how do we keep that going? And talk a little bit about the importance of financial education, especially from the player standpoint, as you're going in from a young person and you're elevating and winning all these tournaments and the like, the importance of that and getting that in early. So if you want to, either one of you want to take that.
Yeah, I think financial literacy is massively important, particularly on the pro side for pro esports players. The LCS. For League of Legends, the North American League, is the average salary is $300,000 per player. They have 10 per org, and there's 10 orgs. Like, I just know endemically that there's just not a whole lot of wherewithal of, like, how to be financially responsible and what that means or what that even looks like. So I think sort of in those higher tiered leagues, it's really important that services like that become relevant, and there's connecting the dots between the two, rather than just talking to your friend set or going on Reddit and looking up what you should do, or is probably not the best advice, but that's what they're used to, right? That's kind of where they turn for information. So, and I think to some degree, potentially, like, publishers and we're starting to see, like, Riot has sort of like a esports sort of player association, like that. Those are the dots that should be connected across there, of, like, this is available to you. It probably makes sense.
Yeah. If I were talking to the Morgan Stanley people in the room, I would say, in addition to that, you also have to look at, and I think about name, image, and likeness, and all of the folks that are starting their own YouTube channels, because now children are like, I want to start my own YouTube channel, or I want to be a TikTok star, and my main vehicle for content is the video game and being an explainer. But I think a lot of people will go after the mega influencers, people that have 3 million, 4 million followers. Pay attention to the nano influencers and the micro influencers, people that have under 50,000. I was talking to a big tech brand this past week, and they were like, we want to invest in gaming for 2023. That's the only thing that they want to invest in, and they don't want to invest in celebrities in that space because they've saturated the market. They want the new people. They want people with fresh perspectives that are up and coming, because they believe that their folks in the community are active, and their community is going to feed other communities. So what I would say is, just like the nano, the micro influencers, if you're partnering with some of those people, look at them and don't overlook them just because of the followers or the way they're explaining something.
Do they want to invest in version 1? Maybe you guys.
No, I mean, that's a great point. In my opinion, and I say this sort of, this is not in my self-interest, but then I'll say something that is. But the investment in micro-influencers, in my opinion, is the most effective way, dollar for dollar, that anybody can spend marketing budget. Yeah. Now, the challenge comes in, how do you scale that? How do you make that work? And that's where organizations like ours can function in a way that helps make that a reality. but to the other point on, the wealth management side of it, and Kirk kind of said what I tend to say, but that financial literacy piece is so important. I mean, the players and the content creators and the talent in this industry are making six figures, mid to high six figures, and like any young celebrity, athlete, actor, musician, etc., they need education on what to do with that type of wealth, especially because it's short term in most cases. So that's critically important. It's things that organizations like ours that have pro players and content creators, we're really trying to do more from a life skills perspective, and we're just scratching the surface of what we should be doing, but trying to do more to help those that are under our umbrella learn those things and grow as people, not just as competitors or content creators.
I got 2 followers on Instagram. You want to invest in
Hey, everyone starts somewhere.
I'm a nano. So last parting advice or commentary that you want to provide here, and I do have one thing. I know we talk a lot about sports, but I know you talk about other things. Like we were talking about shows and the like. So I want you to think about this. Tell me a show that you're watching, that you're either binge watching or you just got hooked on, or somebody just told you about. I'm gonna tell you mine in a minute. But I want you to give your last parting advice just on the esports space, so we can end that conversation and go on something else.
A show I just finished watching
I
that
didn't say the show, man.
Oh.
Give me your last bit of advice in the esports space.
Advice for
You
esports.
ready
space.
to end
I want,
the panel. Go
oh,
ahead.
okay. Advice in esports space.
Last bit of advice.
Yeah. I'm really bullish on the esports space as a component of gaming, right? Because it is tangent. And I think it will only grow over time. And I think there will be more brands entering into the space to create more wealth than for Morgan Stanley to advise more players and others and content creators too. So it will
Thank you for
just
the
only
commercial.
grow over time.
He said amen.
You really moved him. I love that. Just really quickly, I would say, just going back to one of my original points, there's so much opportunity for all of us to win, and I would love to see more companies create spaces that have more intentionality around belonging and mattering and going and beyond diversity and inclusion. We just launched a Web3 pledge with one of our clients that really showcases how to make the promise of being more inclusive with all of your projects. So we just launched that online, and I'm looking to bring more companies into that.
Patience, right? So many of the things that we all work on and that we've talked about up here are not things that happen overnight, right? And this is an industry that's evolving. It will continue to evolve. Those that think about it long term are the ones that will, I believe, have success in that time frame.
Awesome. So now you debriefed, you decompress, you're home or wherever you are. Favorite show, Kurt.
Just finished. Sorry, now I can let it out.
Now you
I
can
just
let it out.
I just finished watching it. This is ultra nerdy, but my wife, who doesn't like video games, also got caught into this and watched every episode on release day with me. Was a League of Legends mockumentary called Players on Paramount Plus, which was awesome. Young Bin Chung was in that. He was also a former RMU player, by the way, and then UCI, but he did an awesome job. I just like the authentic storytelling, and I loved the human drama of it. And I hope there is a season 2. So if you haven't watched it, you should. I thought it was great.
He still stayed with the sport though. Okay.
League of Legends as sport, though.
Oh, okay. I got you, Kurt.
Okay,
Rakia.
to decompress, I've been watching The Resort. I think it's on Hulu. I don't know. Okay, right? A little kooky, but
That's a reality show?
it's not reality, but it's like it's a mystical thing. And of course, I am a Game of Thrones fan, so I watched House of Dragons last night.
Yeah, okay.
I also watched House of Dragons last night. So I appreciate. I won't call them out, but the person I was waiting to text me about dinner plans last night, I appreciate that they didn't, because I got to watch it, and that's, truth be told, that's what I really wanted to do. So.
Oh, yeah. Well,
What show? What about you? What's your show?
oh, so
Or-
me. So I love Ted Lasso
Oh, yeah.
on Apple. I actually rewatched that when I'm actually cleaning up, even if they're trying to recite or trying to catch something I missed. And then I watched Kevin Durant produced a documentary called NYC Point Guards, and it's the point guards of New York City when they came, like Stephon Marbury, Mark Jackson, Kenny Smith, Shamgar God, like all of them. And just knowing that story and just, again, seeing where it started, and just even looking at when you talk about esports and gaming and where that started to what it became and what they became and how the sport changed was fascinating to me. And there was something about exchanging of money in that I thought it was really fascinating too. So if you get to watch that, I think that's on Stars or something. It's really good. And New York Times actually did an article about it. So you know if the Times did something about it, it's something to watch. All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much for having us. Yes. Yes. Thank you so much. Am I turning this back over to my friend here?
Yes, you are. Thank you so much. Let's give them another round of applause, everyone. Sandra Richards, Brett Diamond, Rakia Reynolds, and Kurt Melcher. Excellent panel. Excellent panel. Thank you all.